Well, thanks everybody for coming here. I'm glad to have everybody here this morning. And the good news is, you avoided the snow. It seems like every time we have it here, it's later in spring, and it snows like every single time. Last year we were trying to get through that, and I was worried yesterday because it was starting to come down, so I wore summer clothing, hoping to kind of fend some of that off. We've also got this nice building 99, which is a little bit nicer than the building 20. Buildings, which have been around for probably like 28 years on campus. I think R-Base or somebody used to be in those buildings way back in the day. So this is our research building where most of our MSR folks live today. So glad to have you here. So for the kickoff here, I'm just going to talk for maybe 20 sort of minutes, and then we're going to get into the rest of the day where we have the bulk of the content. As I mentioned, I'm Jason Zander. I'm the general manager for the Visual Studio products, Express and Pro and Team System. That includes things like the IDEs and the languages and all the rest of those sort of environments. I want to welcome everybody here. The cool thing about Lang.net, and I think this is probably maybe the third or fourth time that we've done the event, and it's kind of grown each year. Really happy to have broad industry representation. So we've got not only some Microsoft folks here from local, we also have some of our colleagues from Sun and Google. A lot of cases working on similar kind of technologies. We all work in the same industry, so it's kind of nice to have broad industry representation here at the event. I love my lawyers to death, but they're not invited. This is pretty much engineers, and we get to talk about engineers, and I find that when it's just engineers in the room, we have a lot of fun, and it really doesn't matter what color or smart card you have and what company logo's on it. So you should enjoy the event and use it for those sorts of purposes. This is all about building compilers and runtimes and the stuff that all of us really enjoy. Out of curiosity, how many people here have written a compiler? So I love that question. I always ask that every year because it's like, there's like, outside of like MIT or, pick your favorite school, you're not going to get that many hands up. So that's very cool. One of the things that we like to do here is also provide you with some insight on what we're doing at Microsoft with our various language and tooling efforts and things like that. Just an opportunity so you can see kind of what we've got kicking around in various parts. But we also have a very diverse agenda. So I want to thank all of the speakers outside of Microsoft as well. I think we have quite a bit of content from both internal Microsoft folks as well as external and things like that. So I'm looking forward to seeing all that content here. And as I mentioned, the key thing for the event is really just kind of debating, sharing ideas. What trends do you see? Here's some trends that we see, innovations that people have got going, and just kind of debating that and having a good kind of open conversation. In the end, I think that's probably the funnest part of it. So for my kickoff here, what I wanted to do is give you a little bit more background information on the product that we're working on right now, Visual Studio 2010. And I don't know how many people have tried it yet. We have a public CTP out for people to go grab. In addition to that, we have a first beta that's coming up, which is pretty imminent. Right now, I've shown here the kind of four sort of pillars that we went after with the Pro product. I'm not actually talking about Team System, which is our ALM offering, but in the Pro product, there were four big things that we shot for in the 2010 product. The first one is we really wanted to add a lot more support for code understanding. So things like being able to do better searching and finding, rip apart your content, to be able to figure out what's calling what and things like that. I mean, a lot of this stuff is good kind of table stakes sort of thing, but we tried to integrate it across the board. In addition to that, getting around limitations across projects and languages and things like that as well. And so we have a bunch of new coding functionality inside of the shell for that. In addition to that, we've done a lot of work on the web workload. With Visual Studio 2010 will ship with a new version of the .NET Framework, .NET Framework 4, which has updated versions of all the core infrastructure as well as ASP.NET, WinForms, WebForms, WPF, the entire 9 yards. For building web applications, we've done a lot of work here. You may have seen last week that Scott Guthrie announced the shipping of the MVC controller for ASP.NET. In addition to that, we're actually integrating jQuery into the shell. When I talk about code understanding and things like that, you can actually use jQuery templates inside of the editor, get IntelliSense and things like that. We have one-click deploy and a number of other things like that as well that are inside of the product. We've also, for the other platform side, this is more of a server web workload kind of thing, and we typically, with new releases, target a lot of the major new platform releases that come out from Microsoft. We've also are working on targeting the next version of Office. There's no formal announced dates or even product branding or naming on that, but as you can imagine, the Office team finished up Office 12 and they're working on the next version. So we are working with them to create basically plugins and everything else like that for the next version of Office. We've had that functionality before. One of the big new things that we're adding in this particular release is targeting for SharePoint. which we've got a lot of users coming along saying, hey, I'd really like to target that. SharePoint is also interesting. It is an ASP.NET application itself at the core, but it also has a web part model and things like that for targeting. In addition to that, we've done a lot of work in C++, and from a language perspective, this is probably an interesting one to cover at lang.net. I would say we introduced, .NET a while back. We made a big effort towards pushing, people towards .NET. We've been successful with that. I think people like to have automatic memory collection and things like that. At the same time, we also spent a lot of time with our C++ compiler trying to add .NET. And we got good kind of interop layer and things like that is quite good. But I think a lot of our C++ core constituency felt left behind. And like, come on, I'm still writing MFC. I still have 10 million lines of code. What are you guys doing? So with this particular release, we also made a renewed emphasis going after unmanaged code as well. So trying to go through and add project system scaling, faster compile times. We've been working on performance of the back end, making sure we get better CQ and things like that as well. We've done a significant amount of work on that. And of course, we have a number of very large ISVs, some of them sitting right around us. 65 million lines of, a little bit of Office there, a little bit of Windows there, a little bit of SQL. I mean, there is a lot of folks in this kind of bucket looking for new and modern tools. So that was kind of the fourth pillar. Now, these aren't meant to be comprehensive. Anytime you have a really large team cranking away, we've done significant amounts of features as well. But if you kind of look at the umbrella of, when features come together, what kind of themes should we be going for? These are some of the primary examples that we had. Now, let me switch out of this guy for just a second, and let's switch back over to a terminal server session that I've got. This is actually a latest build of Visual Studio 2010. This is basically prep builds of the Beta 1 product. Like I said, we're shipping the beta here sometime soon. We don't have an announce date for it. This is, I think, the 402 build, which means it's probably about 8 days old or so. But this is the new version that we have. Right now, this is the new look and feel that we've done. One of the things we've done with Visual Studio 2010 is we've included a new rewritten editor, which sits inside of WPF. So it's a C# application. In addition to being using WPF, the kind of easy test for that is kind of going through all the content here. We've got, let's pull this out. I can control click. So if you really want to do some vector scrolling with WPF, you can see the power here. Every pixel is painted. Now, the cool thing about having WPF in here is we can actually, and I think there is actually a talk on this later, so I won't steal their thunder, but because we're using WPF, we can also use markups, we can use media, we can use animations and shapes and the whole 9 yards. And so we think that with this infrastructure, we'll be able to enable a number of very cool editor plugins, and both ourselves and our vSIP partners in the ecosystem are working on those as we speak. You probably won't see a ton of those at Beta 1 because we're all kind of adjusting to the new APIs and getting all of our code to work. But once we get out past that Beta 2 and RTM, you'll have the rest of those sort of pieces. Now, in addition to that, we've got a new XAML editor and things like that. I have a little application here, and we've done a few things. One, all the Chrome and everything else up here has been done with WPF. We've actually, our UX guys, and I'm a stick figures console app kind of guy, so I'm really not good at UX, but they have done a great job trying to figure out how to kind of isolate some of the pieces, take away some of those old bevels, and it almost looked like CTL 3D in the old version if you ever used to hack that in 16-bit. We got rid of a whole bunch of that stuff and got a little bit more modern sort of look and feel to it. So we've also got our new CIDR editor, the editor for WPF, in line with both of those. This is just a little quick application that I wrote this morning. And it does a very simple browse through some pictures sort of stuff and things like that. As you'd expect, we have the normal sort of, breakpoints, blah, blah, blah. If I remove, one of the things I don't like about my application is the way that it's running right here. I don't really know what this picture is. So if I click next on this guy and hit my breakpoint, what I'd really like to do is be able to go in and say, hey, I put a label filled in here. Let's go ahead and set the content equal to the file name. And I'm still debugging, so I'll just go ahead and hit F5 go. And what that'll do is actually apply the changes. This is our edit and continue support. We've had that for a while, but it basically picks up the edit changes I've done, creates a new version of the method, hijacks everything on the other side, and then fixes up all the call frames for it. So at that point, I do wind up having all the content. We can take our breakpoint off here. And we've added, a few nice little things. You can actually pull this guy back up. We've had a little pinnable. I like this feature. I don't know what the heck it is about it, but these little post-it note kind of features, you can basically pin up your variables up on the screen as you're kind of scrolling through. It's kind of like a local sort of watch kind of thing, but that's kind of fun. So if I remove my breakpoint, hit F5 on that, oh, now we have sound. And one of the other things that we added for this current version, I got an exception, so I can go ahead and take a look at that. And so I'm trying to display a picture, and of course the thing is sitting here. It's an ini file, so I obviously put down the wrong kind of content in there. We've done a couple of other things that I could use in some of these sort of circumstances. We have this new historical debugging feature that we've put inside of Visual Studio 2010. Here, all we're really grabbing is events and things like that. I accessed a file, for example. It looks like I did that right here. I can look at where my event handlers have come through. I can see where I've accessed files throughout the entire system, registry events and things like that. Now the other version of this, if I turn it on, is we do actually have historical debugging for frames and content. So, and you can dial that away. We essentially squirrel away heaps and local variables and things like that as you do event and tracing and things like that, which means that if I kind of got here and said, I actually don't like this array, I don't know where this thing came from, I could actually kind of call it it's like a DVR for debugging, right? I can just do back step and go back historically where I was. It'll reset the frame, show me the variables, I can walk through the logic and things like that. Of course I can kill debugging, set a breakpoint, restart, and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but we've got all of this stuff built into Visual Studio 2010. In addition to the usual sort of stuff you'd expect, basically consume first. We did a lot of work around trying to make sure you could do a great job with test-driven development for this particular release, so I can actually write my unit tests, write up the code, see if I really like the signatures and what it kind of looks like, and then I can go back and fold things in, the usual refactoring kind of stuff and things like that. Anyway, this is just a little bit of a glance. There's a ton of stuff in this release, so when we come out with the beta, definitely highly encourage everybody to grab it, give it a shot, tell us what you think of the product, and take it from there. And I think you'll be seeing more of it when some of the talks that people are doing today as well. Now, when I thought about what could I be sharing here today with this group, because you're going to be talking with PhDs and compilers that have written stuff for 20 years, so I think I'll leave that content for later. I thought one of the things that would be interesting here is to kind of go through and say, hey, what the heck are we doing to go build this product? We have well over 1,000 people working on various parts of Visual Studio around the company. We have millions of lines of source code. I think some of you may be in the same bucket, maybe some of you have smaller projects, I don't know, but that's kind of the shape and scale of the stuff that we're working on. And so I thought I'd go through a list of how the heck do we do that, and just kind of tie it back in with some of the products that we're also using. There's a couple of different things that we did. First, the one thing I think we'll all understand this is making big changes across the product is a real pain in the butt. And of course, it all comes down to how well you've architected the product and stuff like that. Visual Studio itself was invented in parallel in some pieces prior to .NET even existing. So we were bootstrapping the CLR in building 42, and we were bootstrapping Visual Studio.NET in building 41. And so we had COM interfaces and stuff like that, and our vSIP interfaces you use to plug in, those are still a primary way that most of our customers plug in. And over the last couple of releases, we have come through and added new .NET functionality, trying to make sure that if you've already written plugins, you don't have to just throw those out and start from scratch. So we have this kind of hybrid environment. So going through and changing things like the editor and rewriting it in managed code, exposing managed interfaces, and then also trying to keep backwards compatibility, as you can imagine, is very difficult. We had to get all the designers lined up, finish all the APIs, look for the perf issues and things like that. Anytime you do coordination, obviously that's very, very challenging. And once we release our beta, all of our partners will be jumping on board as well. By the time you're done, we still have to do all of the integration. With all of the source code, we have a branching structure where all of our builds come out of what we call mains, just the root node. But every team has to come through and do reverse integrations up the tree. You probably do something very similar with branch management. There could be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300 people living in each of those branches. And we've got like 12 of them. So they all have to kind of come through and round robin. So getting those integrations working, keeping the suites working, and then of course, I'm sure you have the same issues in your work with dependency. I check in the editor over here, change the APIs, the C# guys are over here with the VB guys, and IntelliSense is broken. Oh shoot, okay, RI, take all the fixes, go fix all that stuff up. So getting through the churn of those first releases is a pain in the butt, and I'll actually cover what we're doing with the tools for that. At the same time, also this big environment, trying to keep accountability is also very hard. We're pushing very hard on performance right now, and we're going to release beta 1. I think the perf is pretty good. I think you'll get a picture for what it looks like. I'll be honest with you, the perf's not where I would like it to be. So that's something else we'll be concentrating on for the next release. We get a lot of customer feedback, obviously. They like fast code. I like fast code too. So, trying to get through and figure out how to get that going on an end-to-end stack. Once again, the integration. If you just think of hitting the period in the middle of the editor, all of the stuff. I mean, how many cycles go through something like that? The doc goes down. Well, what context am I in? Which IntelliSense, am I going to go pull back in? Which language are you typing code into? Have I got all the symbols yet? If not, where do I go resolve them? Right? Go pop up the little screen and then I have, just lots and lots of stuff. And so by the time you get through those sort of scenarios, as you can imagine, because we have in here JavaScript, C#, Visual Basic, Iron Python, Iron Ruby, F#, blah, 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 and then our third-party partner languages as well, with COBOL. I mean, there's like 100-some languages that plug in. So, getting all that stuff working, done, et cetera. And I'm sure this sounds very, very familiar to you, to folks in the audience that have similar kind of environments, whether it's Eclipse or your own kind of tools or things like that. But it's a lot of fun. The other thing for us is trying to balance out strategy and customers as well. So making sure that we're adding all the customer features that people want, while at the same time we are trying to ensure that we have a consistent strategy for our customers. I'm actually going to talk about C# and VB on the next slide because that's probably one of the most interesting ones for us, trying to get that ever working. And the last thing, of course, is dogfooding the product, to build the product. And let me cover that. On the C# VB thing, we've been working very hard. This is the strategy that we have announced is parity between these two languages. And we've talked with all of our MVPs. That's what they're kind of looking for. And we historically had quite a bit of differences between the two. And so for this release, one of the things you'll see is we've actually caught the languages up in significant ways. For example, we did have link in both languages last go around, but with like auto properties, for example. It's a cool shortcut feature in C#. Get and set is just automatic. That's very cool. Did not necessarily have it in VB9. We will in VB10. And I won't read through the entire list, but you can see we actually had features that were in C# but not VB. We have features that were in VB but not C#. And now we've got some new features that are coming out. For example, the new dynamic language, the dynamic keyword in C#, allowing much easier kind of access to dynamic and scripting languages. Those are coming through in this particular direction. So this is an interesting question for us, right? Because on the one hand, if you imagine audience, what's your target for these languages? C# is very frequently used as, hey, I used to know, I either know Java or I know C++ or I know, a curly brace kind of syntax, sort of syntax. Great, C# is great for that, and it's a very good representation of the underlying, ECMA implementation in the CLR, the object system, the types, and the whole 9 yards. VB itself, historically, if I look back to VBA and VB6 and things like that, was designed to be a very simple, kind of language. In a lot of ways, it really was a dynamic language, very easy for people to use. But we also got the same set of folks saying, look, I want that power too. I don't want the complexity maybe of C++, but I want that power as well. And we did go ahead and add that to VB. And of course, then you've got this environment where it's like, well, for some audience, it's maybe not quite simple enough. There's these extra keywords that I didn't used to see in VB6, and I don't understand what it looks like. And then for other audience, it's like, no, this is right, except for I have a problem with these. You're behind C#. How come I don't have those features, right? So, it's a good example of us just kind of wrestling with how to create a language that can kind of satisfy both sets of programmers and make it in a presentable sort of way. We're working through it. We're doing all the parity work, but that was just an interesting example to kind of cover some of the challenges that we have. And I think we see some of the same sort of things today in the industry. If you look, for example, at some of the innovation in JavaScript, we have a heavily kind of dynamic influence kind of language. I'm not actually declaring explicit types, and I have the ability to do property expanders afterwards and things like that. And then there's been questions about, hold on, I'm a static kind of person. Where's those features? And so you've seen all the various proposals. That's the great thing about computer science. We'll probably replay debates every 15 years, and they're the same ones. You just recycle the names of the technologies and the people involved, and then I always love getting into a room with somebody like Butler Lampson, who basically chews us apart and says, yeah, we tried that in 72. It didn't work. Here's why. Oh, and you're going to do this too. And then you're going to invent async. Yeah, async won't work. Let me tell you, I did this in 74. It's like, okay, great. It's a good wake-up call. Keeps you grounded. All right, so dogfooding. We're doing a significant amount of dogfooding of the product in the platform. Visual Studio, as I mentioned itself, it is a hybrid application. It was written originally in C++, again, before we had .NET. We were still bootstrapping .NET. And we had assets from some of our previous tooling offers as well. In addition to that, so we use .NET, we use Win32. In the latest version, like I said, every release we pick new subsystems and we move them over to managed code. And we're primarily using C# for that implementation internally. This go around, we've replaced the kind of WinForms and GDI with WPF and new vector-based kind of graphics and things like that, while trying to keep the experience familiar. At the same time, TFS, which is a Team Foundation Server, that's our source code control repository, does all of our work item tracking, manages all your assets, and handles all of our team builds and things like that. That is written entirely in C#. And that guy actually targets, SQL Server for the storage in the back end. We have SharePoint integration for reporting and things like that as well. But that middle tier set of logic and customer logic is all written in C#. So we're using a good, healthy combination of all of our technologies to build the product itself. And Visual Studio 2010 is a .NET Framework 4.0 application. So it will deploy the framework with it in order to execute. We obviously use our own tools while building the product. So, I think all of us would expect that. Basically, we pick up the weekly build, go stick it on your machine. I think that's best practice. I'm sure everybody here does that as well. We use TFS for source control, work item tracking. In fact, we just got internally IT deployed version of the Dev 10 server up there, because obviously you have to migrate through and handle the server API changes and stuff like that as well. And then we are actually using Visual Studio and .NET well across the rest of the company. For example, this is active users on TFS inside of Microsoft itself. As you can see, we have Windows and Office, our MS Com team, which is essentially the .NET and Live properties out there, in addition to the SQL Server group. Windows Live, MSIT is our internal IT guys. Those are the folks that write our line of business applications that many of us use today for expenses and head tracks and all the rest of that kind of stuff. In addition to DevDiv itself, and this is fairly late from last year. And then each of these users uses it for different things. So like, for example, Windows is using it for feature tracking and work item tracking, so bugs, features that I want, stuff like that. They're using that part. They haven't moved their source control over, but Office has big chunks of source control running on it as well. So, we're starting to scale up with inside of both this division that I work in addition to the other P&Ls at Microsoft. In addition to that, we've increased, because of that, the number of team projects. And project is just source control project that you create, or a kind of like a route for bugs and features and tracking and stuff like that. We've been on a very steady clip, and we've been very intentional about pulling new users on. We have, like I said, a couple of thousand people working on our project across various branches and bugs and work control and all the rest of that kind of stuff. In addition to that, we've, of course, ramped up significantly on the number of source files. I think this is, 50 million? Or something like that in there, total stored. Obviously, the more and more we plug new stuff out, the more we get additional projects in source control. Work items, 3.2 million. Those aren't all bugs, by the way. Those are work items are a whole bunch of different stuff. I don't want the soundbite to be, hey, there's 3 million bugs in whatever %S product. We use work items to both track feature requests, planning and scheduling and all the rest of that kind of stuff. And then there are defects that we track through the system and stuff. It's used for all of those sorts of things. So these are the total across all of the various repositories that we have at the company. And then team builds is another area where we've gone up. Our team builds, we use the .NET Framework workflow support, which allows you to script how your builds run on top of machines. We use server farms to basically go flush those things out and go kick them off. Automated build reporting and tracking and the usual sorts of stuff that you'd expect from a distributed build kind of environment. We're up to like 650,000 of these things happening, across the board. So we use that ourselves across all these labs. When we do RIs and FIs, you pull it up, get the source code integrated, kick off test builds against it, do all your normal regression prevention stuff, continuous integration and check-in blocking stuff and things like that. Those are all features of our product, and we use those to go build Visual Studio itself. So, anyway, so that's a quick, in 20 minutes or less, overview of Visual Studio 2010, our usage of our own tools and things like that, and just kind of how we drive our project. I definitely am curious to hear from other folks here, maybe in the breaks and stuff like that, how you're doing, how many similarities do you see. Oftentimes when I talk with folks, it's like, yeah, I've got exactly that system, only, mine's called Big Blue, or, it's like, it does exactly that, and, it's always fascinating to see how we arrive at similar solutions and stuff, so that's very interesting. For the rest of the event, Harry and company will be taking care of you guys and making sure you get everything you need. We have a few different other talks that are going to be coming out of our teams that I want to just call attention to. We have C# 4.0, where we're going to be talking about the dynamic keywords. As you you know, and I think Jim and John and company, yeah, Jim's back there as well. Our dynamic language runtime, we'll have dynamic talks as well, but we've also turned around and integrated those into our static languages to make it, you know, super simple. So there's a lot of background information on that one. I showed a little bit of the editor, but really I just showed you the basics. There's going to be another talk about the editor itself, WPF, integration, and hopefully show you a couple more of the flashier things you can start doing now that we have all this vector graphic support built into the editor and ready to go, and it's, you know, scriptable. In addition to that, CLR 4.0, this is the first new version of the CLR since 2005. It's actually something we've been working on since 2005 when we shipped. There was a hop in between where we shipped a version of the CLR stripped down with Silverlight 2. But, you know, basically there was CLR 2 and we built framework 3.0, 3.5, you know, and 2.0 on top of that, and now there's a new CLR. So that's a big change, and there's a bunch of queued up really cool features in that release that'll be coming out, so that'll be interesting. And then in addition to that, we've had F#, and F# is part of Visual Studio 2010. In fact, when you get the beta, there's F# templates right there with tutorials built in, so you can file a new project and try it out, and so there'll be a lot more information on that one as well. And then, of course, we have 2 whole days of fantastic contributions, again, from all companies across the board, and a lot of hopefully great conversation. So with that, let me say thanks. Any questions or anything else I can answer for folks? Otherwise, I think we have a break.